Welcome to Season 4 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hi, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 138, Season 4, Episode 14. Happy to have you back with me today. A little bit of exciting stuff going on. I have Day After Disaster, the second edition, finished, ready for sale. It's available in both print and ebook. Print's not out on Amazon yet. It takes a little bit for me to go through all the print requirements and get that proof approved. But I should be receiving it probably today in the mail and then go ahead and updating that so it's ready for worldwide distribution. So that's exciting. In that book, I included 5 bonus chapters, which is the Lost Vegas years. And the bonus chapters kind of walk into the beginning of them going to Las Vegas and whatnot. And a little bit of a secret just between me and my podcast listeners, I am working on doing a series of those bonus chapters that will cover that 9 years. So that's kind of exciting. It's a really cool project to work on, actually. Last week in the Changing Earth podcast, Vince and Erica went back to Houston and they were trying to rescue the people there that were left in the hospital. And they met the carnage there. And then when they got back to the militia camp, Cassidy's there. They get this whole story about, the death match and how they're solving problems now because they just don't have time to go through a jury process and everything. So I kind of thought of it like the duel and whatnot, Give it a little bit of action sequence because I just love that stuff. So anyway, Erica and Vince, they're decided they're going to take off. They're going up to Dallas to go try and get Nancy. And in the meantime, we're going to catch up this week with Master Sergeant Bennett, who is also on his way to Dallas to lay a trap for Vince and Erica there. So we'll have to see how that goes. But today on the show, I have James Razzone on, and he's a really interesting guy that I was contacted by, and he writes some great books. And so I got a little bit of wind flow today. If you heard the door open, it just opened on its own. A little bit of wind flow going on. We got a big storm raging in the background. So anyhow, James Razzone is on. He is a wonderful dude that I met, and he has tons of great stories that he is publishing like crazy time. So we'll go ahead and introduce his books and tell you a little bit about his military backdrop and where he got all these really great ideas from. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into Battle for the South. Chapter 14. Patrick Bennett drove the Jeep down the street. He knew they had to get off the road, but he had no idea where to go. The 3 other young men sat silently lost in thought, relying upon him for direction. "Dex," Bennett yelled to the back. "Yes, Master Sergeant," Dexter replied. "Do you know when Sean's band was supposed to play in Dallas?" Bennett wondered. "They're in Dallas June 2nd, Dexter replied, "but they're sure to look for us there, if the federal forces haven't taken them yet." "Oh, shit. What about Daniel, Master Sergeant? What about my grandparents?" Dexter rambled on frantically. Trucker licked his face, trying to calm him. "Calm down, Dex. We're going to figure this out." Bennett didn't want to lose control. "How, Master Sergeant? We're all fugitives now. My dad's in a federal prison." Johnny was freaking out. Heading north, Bennett spied an abandoned warehouse with a small covered lean-to big enough to conceal the Jeep. He whipped it in, causing the young men to jerk violently. "Moore and McClintock, secure the vehicle. Smith, come with me and secure the warehouse," Bennett snapped, jumping swiftly out of the Jeep. "Yes, sir," they replied instinctively. With the Jeep covered and the building secure, they moved the gear from the vehicle to a small corner of the warehouse. Smith went out on watch, and Bennett kept Dex and Johnny's mind off reality by having them do a gear check and weapons maintenance cycle. Evening was coming on quick, and chow was not something they had planned on providing for themselves. Luckily, the uncertainty of daily circumstances caused them to include at least a 72-hour food supply in their packs at all times. Thanks to their previous stop, they also had civilian clothing. Blending in would be much easier in civvies, if they did venture out. Bennett knew it was only a matter of time until the whole city was locked down and swept. That's exactly what I would do, he chuckled to himself. There would be no stone left unturned until I found the fugitives. He paced the floor, lost in thought. He knew the Jeep was a big problem. If the federal forces found it near the warehouse, it would give them away completely. Either they or the Jeep had to go. "Dexter," Bennett called. "It's time to work." "Yes, sir," Dexter replied, gnawing on some jerky. "Find a sniper point. We have to get the Jeep out of here or we have to move. Scout it," Bennett ordered. He had faith in Dexter's abilities and watched as he clicked on his harness that could hold Trucker, his faithful companion, as an accessory. Dexter had killed the dog's mother when his family had been attacked by her pack in Nevada. His throwing knives, which Dexter kept strapped to his other leg, had been his silent weapons of choice. He grabbed his sniper rifle and slunk out the doorway with Trucker tight on his heels. "They're going to kill my dad, aren't they?" Johnny asked as he stirred a packet of soup in a small tin cup over a candle. "Honestly, Johnny?" Bennett asked. "Yes, sir, honestly," Johnny answered, looking up at Bennett. "I'd be surprised if he's not dead already. Something serious must have happened for the federal forces to have turned on the mercenary army. They would know it means war for sure. The mercenary army remained independent to provide a last check and balance to the new federal power. It seems Colonel Henderson is claiming total control," Bennett explained. "We have to get him out," Johnny swirled his stew vigorously. "He's in the heart of Kansas City, Johnny. There's no way. We have to get out of this city and go to the Badlands to regroup," Bennett explained. "Don't you mean north?" Johnny asked, thinking of the base in Minnesota. "Johnny, if they have declared war on the mercenaries, they've probably taken the base already," Bennett speculated. "Everyone would have fled to the Badlands to rally for the war." Dexter came back into the room with Trucker still stuck right behind him. "That was fast," Bennett remarked. "That's because I found a perfect place for us. Pack it up, Johnny," Dexter told him. Johnny slurped down his soup in a few gulps and cleaned up his makeshift kitchen. They shouldered their packs and called in Smith. They cautiously moved through the city. The lockdown sirens had sounded, and the emptiness was eerie. Dexter led them off track a few times to avoid search teams rounding corners in the distance. They had to climb up and over walls and down and under fences, but they reached the building of choice. Dexter clicked Trucker into his harness. The dog, suspended beside his owner, went up the ladder with little delay, and the group followed. Once at the top, Dexter showed Bennett a small walkway next to the roof of a building. "Does it lead somewhere, Dexter?" Bennett asked, trying to look around the corner. "No, check this out," Dexter said, elated. He sat on a spot on the roof and the whole corner popped up, shingles and all. Then the piece slid on metal sliders that had been built in and revealed a secret room. Inside the room there was nothing, no door, no light, nothing. This secret latch was the only way in or out. "How did you find this?" Bennett marveled. "I wanted to get a better view, so I jumped up to climb the roof when the whole thing popped out. It's perfect, isn't it, sir?" Dexter boasted. "Great job, Dex. Let's lock it down for 12 hours. That's a city's normal maximum lockdown period." "Yes, sir," the young men replied. They all piled into the room and wedged wood into the panel sliding mechanism so it could no longer be opened. There was no guarantee this room was not already known about or that it would keep them hidden, but it was worth a shot. They stared into the dark, never hearing a thing besides the sound of one another breathing. One by one, each of the young men fell asleep until Bennett was left alone in the dark, wondering how he would ever get these boys out of this city alive. Now a fugitive from the federal government, Master Sergeant Bennett takes steps to secure his team. His disbelief that the government would take these steps haunts his mind every second. And here today to talk about what happens when people lose faith in the government, what happens to that country, what the ripple effects are, is James Rizzone. James Rizzone is the author of Red Storm series, World War III series, Interview with a Terrorist, and Dinner with a Terrorist. He's an Amazon best-selling author. James Rizzone started a military career in the Army National Guard as a communications specialist and forward observer for a self-propelled artillery unit. He later joined the U.S. Air Force, becoming an interrogator during the 2007 Iraq War troop surge. After 10 years of service in the armed forces, James spent several additional years in Iraq as a contractor for the Department of Defense and the Department of State. During all this time in the sandbox, books and writing became an escape. Later, James worked as a military advisor in the military area of identity intelligence for U.S. Central Command during General Davis Petraeus' leadership and U.S. European Command under Admiral James Stavridis and General Philip Breedlove. This experience led him to travel and work in countries all across the globe, giving him a unique global perspective. During this time, he also completed a Master of Science degree at the University of Oxford. You can find out more information about James at author-james-rozone.com. That's author-james-rozone, ROSONE.com. Before we bring James onto the show, let's go ahead and hear a word from our sponsor. Today, I'm very excited to announce a special free gift to all of our subscribers that have an IRA, 401k, or retirement account. Today, we are giving away a free hardback copy of Jim Rickard's latest book, The New Case for Gold, a $26 value. I can personally tell you that this is a must-read. This free book is brought to you by Advantage Gold and is written by Jim Rickards. For those of you who don't know Jim Rickards, he is the nation's most vocal and intelligent proponent of the gold standard. Not to mention, he is a national security advisor, Pentagon insider, and financial warfare expert. Before writing this book, Jim wrote 2 New York Times best-selling books, The Death of Money and Currency Wars. Inside The New Case for Gold, Jim turns his attention to the everyday American and how he can use gold, the #1 asset in a currency crisis, to not only survive, but thrive in the coming dollar fallout. This book could change your life. This is what you will learn when you read it. How to protect your IRA, 401k, or retirement account from the coming dollar collapse. The single greatest buy indicator ever devised for gold. A step-by-step walkthrough of one of Jim's most powerful CIA prediction techniques. The Chinese gold warfare plan that could bring U.S. dollar holders to their knees. If you're making the #1 gold buying mistake. And much, much, much more. The time to buy gold is now, and this book is the perfect guide to help you protect your retirement from a pending financial crisis. Jim says, when the collapse happens, it's going to happen quickly. You won't see it coming. There won't be time to run out and buy gold, and it probably will not even be available at that stage. This hardback book is free to you today, but you have to hurry. Books are limited. We only have a limited number of copies to give away, and these books will go fast. If you have an IRA, 401k, or retirement account and want to learn how you can protect your financial future from a pending dollar collapse, then this will be the best gift you ever receive. To claim your free book, go to www.author-sarahfhathaway.com/newsletter and click on the link for this week's blog. Again, to claim your free book, to learn how you can protect your financial future from a pending dollar collapse, go to www.author-sarahfhathaway.com/newsletter. That's www.author-sarahfhathaway.com/newsletter. Hi, and welcome back to the Changing Earth podcast. Today I am here with first-time guest James Rozone. James, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, great to be on here with you guys.
Well, as a first-time guest, I would like you to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and then let us know any projects that you're working on and where we can find you.
Sure. So, as you alluded, my name is James Rozone. I come from a bit of a military background. I spent 10 years in both the Army side and then the Air Force. Did multiple tours in Iraq, so I've got quite a bit of experience in that particular theater. And then worked another 8 more years as a defense contractor. Spending the majority of my time in a little obscure area of intelligence called identity intelligence, which is essentially the tracking of individuals, organizations, and groups. So that's kind of a bit of my background. Education-wise, I've got a master's science from the University of Oxford. So I've been able to be around some pretty incredible people and worked at some very senior leadership positions within the Defense Department.
Very
Currently,
nice.
Yeah, see, right now we're working on building out a great series called the Red Storm series, which kind of looks at how an accidental war between Russia and NATO ends up transpiring over Ukraine, and how that war essentially ends up spreading to Korea and eventually Taiwan.
Oh my goodness. I hope that's not prophetic there.
You know, one would like to think it's not. However, it is interesting how we're seeing a lot of things playing out, and we get that comment quite a bit in a lot of our reviews.
I bet. But thank you so much for your service to the country. That's just awesome too, that you dedicated your life there. That's really commendable.
Appreciate it.
So today we are talking about what happens when the people of a country lose faith in their leaders, or people of a group, they lose faith in their leaders. And this comes about in my story because I have this mercenary crew that's kind of been a check and balance to the federal forces that was developed after this huge natural disaster. And now the federal forces have turned against this mercenary force. So they're basically doing like the final takeover here. And my Master Sergeant Bennett, he's been very loyal to his cause, and he's just absolutely losing faith in the military that he grew up on and that he, was raised to protect and everything, and turned against them.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're all turning against everybody. So it's definitely a point in the story where a major shift has happened. So one of my questions that I have for you is, how is confidence and trust even earned by the government? Like in our society right now, it just seems like, nobody has trust and faith in the government. So how is that earned by a government system?
It's a very good question, and it's, I think, a question that has kind of dogged a lot of our political leaders and a lot of people. I personally think that the government earns trust by listening to the people who have elected them, and really kind of identifying what are the true needs, what's going on in the community that people are wanting to see addressed. And it really comes down to the government and the elected officials working for the good of working for the common good, and not for fringe or special interest groups that don't represent the whole. Often those special interest groups or fringe elements tend to be the loudest voices, though. Mm-hmm. And as the old saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Right.
And so sadly, a lot of those types of actors end up being the ones that get the biggest voice, despite the fact that they don't represent the large group of people. So I think that can be a bit of a challenge. But when it comes to how do you earn trust, it really comes down to doing what you're saying you're going to do. If you're talking about lowering taxes for people because the tax burden is too high, then it's legitimately going in there and saying, okay, how do we make this more effective and more fair for people while still meeting the financial needs of what the government has committed to providing and doing? Because you got to figure out how do you balance the wants and the needs of the many, and not just the desires of the few. I think that's kind of a hard thing to tackle, but I think that's really critical for government in earning its trust, is people's trust, is listening to what they want and then doing the best they can to meet those needs.
I can't agree with you more. I think that, a lot of people go out on their election tour and they make a lot of promises, and then they turn around and nothing seems to happen once they get into Washington, D.C., So I've been preaching just how sad it is that we've pulled away from local government so much, because the local governments are really what gives the communities a voice and then an overall voice at the state level. But even the states don't have that much control right now with the federal government taking over the way they have. So I just don't see a way that it's possible to hear the voices of so many people under one umbrella.
Well, it's really difficult, too, because you've got the federal government, on the one hand, has federal laws, and then you've got state government that has state laws. And sometimes they're harmonized and they work well together, and other times they're not. And what's challenging is you have states who will say, this is a state rights issue, government needs to butt out. But then if it's an issue that the majority of the people in the state don't want or agree that the government should be involved in and have a disagreement with a neighboring state, then they're all for the federal government coming in and overriding the state rights. Like, for instance, a great example, so you have this marijuana debate for legalizing marijuana, or at least medical marijuana, where the federal government has laws that say this is a class 1 drug and you can't do it. But then you have states saying, well, we're putting it to a vote to the people, and the people are voting for it. So then you have a state saying, well, we believe our state rights trump federal rights. And then you have another, on the flip side, you had, the gay marriage. So you had the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, where the federal government, where you had states, individual states in the country were putting state laws saying that, gay marriage is illegal. But then you had a couple of other states that said, well, wait a second, we want the federal government to come in and override those states' rights and say they're null and void. So it's kind of it's like playing mom and dad against each other. At one time, it depends on what it is you want. You go to mom, and then if you want something else, you go to dad. And then you get mom and dad to kind of argue and hee-haw back and forth about what it is you ultimately want and how you want to get it. So that's kind of how it ends up working out in a nutshell.
That makes sense. That's a good analogy, because it's true how some things, actually in California, we didn't vote for gay marriage. And so then they just took it to the Supreme Court and overruled that. And so it's kind of hard to understand when the federal government can just pick and choose to override that. Maybe that's a debate.
Well, that's what we have to come down to,
right?
Well, yeah, and that's what it ultimately comes down to as constituents and as people. We have to either agree that the federal government, which supersedes all 50 states, is the ultimate authority, and therefore we're going to submit and obey that law, or we have to say, well, the state is the ultimate arbitrary. But if the state is the ultimate authority, then we have to accept the fact that there are other states that are not going to agree with us, and we have to be okay with that.
Right.
And I think that's the big challenge.
And isn't that like the great diversity of the United States? We were supposed to be the United States, individual states doing their own thing, that were all united under one federal government. So if you don't like what was going on in one state, you could opt to move to another state where that might be available to do that activity.
Correct. Yeah. And that really was the beautiful way of how the framers designed it, designed it as a republic like that.
Right. Yeah, stitched it all together. Well, I would love them to stitch California in half. That would be great. We'll just cut the coast off.
Well, maybe that can get put on the ballot there, and you guys can actually have a legitimate vote on that, so you can separate the rural state from the rest of the metropolitan state.
Because we do not get a say at all out here. So there's no win for the country people in California. So the United States is the first modern government that was created under the rule of the people, under the rule of citizens. So does it make it more or less important for the government to maintain this faith that the people have? I mean, what happens when it unravels?
I think it's very important that the government maintain that faith, because if people lose faith in the government system, if they lose faith in, one voice, one vote, one voice, then what do we have? We don't have a country. We don't have something we believe in. We don't have something to hold us together. And I think a very big misconception that people have is they view and they think that the United States is a democracy. But the United States is not a democracy. The United States is a republic. And the framers intentionally designed it to be a republic as opposed to a democracy, because democracy is frankly mob rule. It's just, The whims of the people can change, and a republic system that we have set in place helps put a lot of checks and balances there. A great case in point is how the Electoral College is run. So you can literally have 5 or 6 states, because of their population, dominate the entire country's politics, and the rest of the country would be irrelevant.
Right.
Like when you look at the 2016 election, so Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. But she won the popular vote because they ran up the scoreboard in New York and California.
Yes.
But when you look at the individual breakdown of the counties won versus what Trump won, it was enormous discrepancy there. The land mass of what Trump won versus what Clinton won was enormous, and that's why we have that checks and balance in place. Because otherwise, what would be the point of people in Wyoming, Montana, Michigan, Wisconsin, any of the Midwest states? What would be the point of them even bothering to vote if we were a straight democracy? There'd be no point to voting, because the decision would automatically be decided in between 25 and 35 of the largest cities in the country, and they would decide everything for us.
What I've heard is that if we were a popular vote, they could pretty much, if they got Southern California, basically LA, San Diego, and then New York, that could overrule the rest of the country. So there would be no reason to go any other place besides Southern California and New York.
Yeah, I mean, you just pretty much focus on the top 25, maybe the top 35 states in the country or cities in the country, and that would be it. You wouldn't need to bother going anywhere else, and that would really kind of take away. I think the voter participation would be significantly lower than it already is.
Oh yeah,
it's bad enough that our participation is at 46%, 48%. It would just depress it even further.
Well, that's 100% how we feel out here in California, because it's like, okay, for president, why even bother go vote? Because that as soon as LA, San Francisco and San Diego run up their numbers, that there's no way anybody can stand against them. It's like, we need an electoral system in California, to be able to combat that, but they'll never allow that either because it's mob rule.
Well, it takes away from their political power to do that, so it's not in their advantage to do it.
Exactly. So why would they do that? One thing they don't give back is power. That is for sure. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, once you've ceded it, it's gone.
So do you think that the forefathers of the United States foresaw the day when the sheer size, like the sheer number of citizens that we have in our country, would cause this duality within the nation, that one side's never going to trust another? I mean, Trump's doing a lot of what he said he was going to do. He's trying to do that in office and really stay true to his word. But there's some people that are never going to trust this man no matter what. It's like, do you think that the forefathers foresaw this happening?
In a way, I think they did, and I say that because of the way they designed the country. Because when they designed the electoral process, again, they did it as a republic with an electoral college.
Right.
And in that respect, I think they did foresee this type of a problem happening. What I don't think they saw or could have envisioned, however, is how technology would play such a pivotal role in the election. And I don't think anyone realized how important technology would be in the 2016 election as it was in comparison to previous elections. Because in 2012, Facebook at that point was still relatively new. It was 5-6 years in its development.
Right.
Google hadn't been around for quite as long as it has now, as in 2016. So there's so much more data that has been accumulated and acquired from 2012 to 2016, and the advancement in the ability of a campaign to do its targeting is just incredible compared to what it was before. Because now, I mean, I'm not sure, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy who did who was the digital head for Trump's campaign, basically walked into Google and Facebook and said, we want to spend $200 million with you to develop targeted micro ads.
Uh-huh.
Well, what company is going to say, I don't
No.
want your $200 million?
Right.
So they had, premier access with Facebook and with Google to develop targeted ads. And they were able to figure out how to make an ad that was specifically tailored to each individual voting district for people that mattered in that district. So there wasn't an ad that they had that was a generic run-of-the-mill ad across the whole country. Every ad was tailor-made to that specific district and what they
Wow.
cared about. And by getting that targeted and micro level down into their advertising, they were really able to swing votes. And like you say, when it comes to how one side will never trust the other side from an intelligence perspective, this was the entire game plan that the Russians tried to do with the influence of the election. And it's really sad that the opposing party and the media is in such collusion with the Russian intelligence and perpetuating this, the big lie,
Right.
what's been going on. And then it's really sad that, again, that they have pitted American against American, neighbor against neighbor in this to discredit and delegitimize the election when there's actually no evidence that a single vote was changed.
Right.
There was no vote changed. It was the perception of a change that has fueled this whole conspiracy collusion. But the reality is there has been no actual evidence of that actually having happened.
And that's crazy too, because I know you could definitely get a profile and then say your 2 cents or whatever, but that's just somebody on social media saying so. I don't know how much stock anybody puts in that nowadays, but for them to perpetuate the division makes sense, because then you're not a united front, and that's exactly what they need to keep us weaker, basically.
Well, and there's part of it is an echo chamber that a lot of the news media and the politicians all live inside of. And then there's the other factor of ratings and clickbait and being
Right.
able to derive more money. At the end of the day, it all comes down to how can I make more money? And the way I make more money is by making things more sensationalized and bigger than what they really are. And therefore, I get people to click on my headline because it's got some sensational thing there. And it doesn't actually have to have any real meat to the article, but it just causes them to click on there, and then hopefully they see something else and they click on something else, and then there's another, they make more money by it through advertising dollars and showing more traffic and etc. It's kind of a really vicious cycle how the whole marketing game works like that.
So this is all a fresh, like you say, 2012, it was pretty new. 2016, it really stepped up. Do you think that we're going to reach a point? Because I've kind of already reached my saturation point on a personal level. I hardly even look at it anymore or think about, that kind of stuff. I have trusted news sources where I go on the internet to get a news feed that I try to read both sides so that I can be well informed. But do you think that we'll reach this oversaturation point where they've tried to over-sensationalize things so much that we just stop listening? Or do you think that everyday Americans are just kind of hooked in and don't care? They're just going to keep rolling with all this BS?
Now, I think at this point, people have gotten to the point now where they're just so oversaturated with everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, when everything is the end of the world, nothing's the end of the world. And it's like the whole saying of Chicken Little, crying that the sky is falling.
Right.
Well, if you constantly are saying that over and over and over, then at some point, people stop believing you. And this is the danger that the media has put themselves in, is they've gone from reporting factual, evidence in details to just hyperbole and making up their own narrative or how they feel about something. And the problem is they've fallen hook, line, and sinker for so many of these, intelligence, operations that the Russians have run, that campaigns have run, and so on, that they can't tell what way is up and what way is down anymore. And people have become so saturated with it. I mean, it's like if you turn on MSNBC or CNN, you would think that, it was the end of the world. You would think that the Russians are literally in charge of our country right now.
Right? Yeah.
There's just no balance to anything anymore. And I think that's just a huge problem. They just discredited themselves. And it's so sad to see, because we have to rely on the news media to be able to report on what's going on and give us actual evidence. But if they're so biased and they can't get over themselves on that, then how are we to trust them?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And, there's so much understanding that we lack as Americans, I believe, because even when you turn on world news, you're not seeing world news anymore. You're just seeing arguing in Washington. And, I'm really interested to know what is going on in Ukraine. What happens to the everyday Ukrainian citizen when they wake up and go to work in the morning? What are they dealing with? What are we doing over there? And none of this is reported on. It's just, let's get on TV and argue with each other. And none of that gets you anywhere, and we don't get informed.
Well, for instance, just earlier this week, there were 200 plus Russian paid mercenaries that are fighting for the Assad regime in Syria.
Right.
Well, these guys tested one of our bases where we have a bunch of Marines at, providing ground support to the Syrian opposition forces who are fighting ISIS. Well, they attacked that base to test their resolve, and we summarily wiped out 200, Russian mercenaries. But we didn't see hardly any of this ever talked about in the media.
At all.
This is a big deal.
Right?
Here you have a Russian-backed ground force attack the United States Marines. We're not even talking about it.
At all. It was so incredible. I was like, did this even happen? Because I'm seeing it on the, news sources that I go to that are alternative news sources. But you didn't hear anything about it. Anything. I mean, and then, so for us to understand what is going on, do the Ukrainian people even want us over there? Do people want us over? We have to have a cultural reference, to a cultural standpoint. We can't just come from American lives where, honestly, I believe, down to our poorest person on the street, we're all spoiled compared to what happens in other countries. And so for us to come with our American attitudes and just be like, oh, yeah, well, they deserved it or whatever. Well, why? Why? That's what is extremely lacking and frustrating.
Well, the other thing, too, is, remember, in the case of Ukraine, when the fall of the Soviet Union happened, the Ukrainian government had nuclear weapons. They had a very large stockpile of nuclear weapons, and they agreed to disarm and give those nuclear weapons to the United States in exchange for a treaty agreement that said the United States and Russia would guarantee integrity of the country of Ukraine. And when the Russians decided to annex Crimea and then annex several other portions of eastern Ukraine, they violated that. And the United States just walked away from the treaty obligation we had to not allow that to happen. So if we're willing to walk away from treaties that say we're going to defend you, we're going to ensure your integrity, then what does our word really mean? And I'm not saying we need to go to war with Russia over Ukraine, but we needed to step up and tell the Russians that this is not acceptable. And putting sanctions on a couple dozen Russian businessmen isn't an appropriate response.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of other countries that we also have treaties with to protect them. So what are those countries now thinking?
Exactly. I mean, the United States just can't be trusted, and that's a bit of a problem. So I don't know. Our foreign policy has been a bit of a mess as of late, but hopefully it's starting to get a little more straightened out now.
On track. Yeah, that's the only problem with us swinging from the left to the right so violently, in my opinion, is the difference of national security policy, how each side feels about that, and then the people that are relying on us to be this trusted source, have to deal with, oh my gosh, 4 years later we could be whipping right back to the other side. So that's kind of a problem. I think they need to take that maybe out of the executive branch's hands a little bit more and put it in a more stable place.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why traditionally U.S. foreign policy doesn't change very much. It changes very subtly, typically over time, and we see it. We saw a lot more of that change, like you say, when Obama came into power, and now we're seeing a heavy change again when Trump comes into power. I'm just hoping that whoever is president next will at least try to maintain some semblance of stability with the stance, and we don't make another further swing to the right or a further hard swing to the left, but try to stay either where we are or just move very little to the right or left.
I would agree on that. I don't agree that that's what's going to happen, though. I think it's just a period of rapid swing right now that everybody else, the liberal side is going to come out in full, armor on the next election and be like, okay, we got to get everybody voting. Because a lot of people assumed Hillary was going to win, so they didn't go out and vote. So I believe that's a lot of why she didn't get elected, in my opinion. Thank goodness above that happened, Or she just wasn't the woman for the job, whatever that might be. But, I'm just fearful that we'll have another rapid swing on the next time because
she was just a poor candidate. That was really what it comes down to. I don't think that country wasn't just ready for a woman or anything. I think it was just she was just the wrong woman.
I would agree with that so much. It's just her likability was just not there. And there was so much distrust in the past. You don't want to put a woman into office who's leading our whole country that her whole past track record has been marked with what happened here and what happened there, right?
Well, there were legitimately good candidates out there. I mean, Joe Biden would have been a good candidate to have run on their side. I'm trying to think of that Virginia senator, Jim Webb. He would have been a great centrist Democrat to run. I mean, I could have supported Jim Webb, but that's not who they went for. It was clearly rigged and in the bag for one candidate, and I think when that broke, when WikiLeaks broke that information, I think that cripples her ability, because at that point, so many people are like, "What's the point? This is just a rigged system."
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on that. Right on the money. And that leads us into our next question is, why is this trust so important through every division of government and, within the citizenry as well? Why, you can't just have one part that's working, right? So why is that important?
Well, it comes back to, like you're saying, what type of activities can put trust back into the equation. And I think the biggest part of that is just, being honest and transparent with people is how you're going to earn their trust back. In the case of, I'm not trying to be partisan when I say this, but in the case of like what happened with the Democrats, the way they're going to be able to overcome that is to get away from their superdelegate motto that they have and just go back to allowing, straight primary votes. So one voice, one vote, and it matters, and that's how it's decided. Because in those cases, when it was decided like that, in the 2016 election, we were seeing that Sanders was legitimately winning.
Yeah.
When it was decided via a caucus and the superdelegates, it was in the tank for Clinton, and he didn't have a prayer. And I think that was wrong, because I didn't agree with a lot of Sanders' stances, but I agreed with the process that if that's what his party elected to nominate him to be the candidate, then that's what should have happened.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
If he would have won in the general, then he would have won the general. But he got robbed, and that I thought was wrong.
And you need to respect the process too, because that's what everybody is counting on. And I feel that was a huge letdown for everybody who, for a lot of Democrats, that they were like, okay, well, we're going to stick with our party, but we want Bernie to be our guy, and then when that whole process failed them, oh man, it was just such a dissolution. I live here in California, obviously, right? And I, knew many, many Sanders supporters who were just like, this, this is it, right? We can't do this anymore. We can't support this system that we can't even believe in. We don't even have trust in.
Yeah, I mean, Sanders wasn't a Democrat. He's a socialist, and whatever. That's his view.
I don't agree with it. Yeah, exactly. But I respect. Everybody's got an opinion. Yep.
Yeah, and he ran as a Democrat because of the way our two-party system is set up. It's the same with Trump. Trump's not really he's not a right-wing conservative. He's a very much centrist, middle-of-the-road kind of guy. He's a populist. But he had to pick a party, and the Republicans happened to be the party that fit with the majority of his views. And his views have evolved over time, as everyone's views do. I mean, I haven't always traditionally voted Republican or Democrat. I've swung both ways depending on the candidate and the choices and the situation at the time the country's in. But that's just kind of that's how the cookie crumbled in 2016, and that's just where we stand right now.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see it if Bernie Sanders would have been able to go up against Trump. Just because, like I said, but it would have basically been not a Republican or a Democrat, and it would have finally kind of broken that mold, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it would have been two populists running against each other to see what happens, and again, it goes to, the other question you were posing was, what do we do to regain that confidence after it's been lost? And that really comes down to admitting what went wrong and then providing a path forward to rectify that wrong. And I think Donna Brazile really tried to do that by admitting that the system was rigged. And, she laid out and says, look, this is what happened. I don't agree with it. I came into the middle of this, and this is what needs to happen to fix it. And I think that was probably the most honest, straightforward thing that could have been said. Mm-hmm. But the question now remains, will they actually move forward and do that? Will the two deputy chairs or two co-chairs that run the party now actually implement that? Will they actually change and do that? If they are able to, then I think there is the ability for them to regain confidence and trust in their party again. If it doesn't appear that that's going to happen, then they're done. It really is it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the 2018 and then moving into the 2020 election.
It will be. Because I think that as the younger generation gets older and older, not only are they disheartened with the system, but they've been listening to their parents talk about how disheartened they are with the system, So there's going to be a lot of, it's going to be hard to swing these kids to go, yeah, you can trust us, They're going to be like, uh-huh. I mean, I've been listening to it my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been, lied to and told by one candidate after another, this is, what I'm going to do for you. This is how we're going to fix things. And, it never gets happened. Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever gets done. And right now, I guess I feel the most optimistic and excited, and I'm hoping that something legitimately can be done. But if I don't see that progress in 3 years from now, then, I probably will vote the other way. But we'll have to wait and see,
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, too, as far as candidates go now. So many people are like, we're all going for it. So.
Well, that's the best thing about, politics and candidates. They're like diapers. You can change them often, and they don't stink good.
Right? Yeah, exactly. What about on on a outside of the party systems? What do you think? What kind of moves do you think the government could take to actually get the people back behind them, minus going to war, basically? I don't know that would help either at this point, unless there was a serious reason. But, when we got attacked in 9/11, everybody kind of rallied back around of, okay, we need to support this because we have to protect ourselves, and so I would hope that's not the only way. There's got to be a way.
No, I certainly don't think it is the only way. Yeah, there's definitely not. That's not the only way. And I think a big part of it is we've got to get the country to stop focusing on itself and to stop, boo-hoo, I'm a victim. Uh-huh. And we need to, what we got to do is you got to come up with a national program, a national project to inspire people. Yeah. When Kennedy gave his speech about sending a man to the moon
Right?
this decade, he inspired a nation to move forward into a great cause, to really push forward with something. Like if the president came out and said, by God, hell or high water, we're going to put a man on Mars in the next 6 years.
Yes.
And just move the whole country to that effort. That would be something that I think people could rally around and unify them, is doing national projects like that. Where everyone gets involved, everyone gets excited about it. But right now, everyone's still focused on me, myself, and I, and what the government can do to help me. We've got to get people off of that fixation and fixate them on something greater than themselves. And I think that's how you unify people and how you get them to really come together.
That's what I've been saying too. Like, the problem doesn't just lie in the government. The problem lies in the people as well. It's a partnership. Excuse me. It's a partnership. You have to, have the support of the people to be able to support the government. Trust works both ways. And so the people need to actually rally up. And I couldn't agree more. Like, that is exactly what I think we need to do, is have an explorative mission. I think humans are naturally explorers. And we need to have some kind of a mega focus for everybody to be like, yes, we're doing this. It's going to happen, and we can rally behind it and be really proud of it. And so I couldn't agree more with your suggestion for how to take the country in like a really positive direction.
Well, part of the reason, like I say, looking to the stars is because in the 1960s, when we were going to put a man on the moon, we didn't have the technology to do that. So
right?
We had to invent it and create it.
Yes.
And for us to put a man on Mars, or to make a
colony
spacecraft that can, colony or a spacecraft that can go out of our solar system, we have to invent that technology. And when we go to start inventing that technology and being able to do that, there are so many benefits that we're going to be able to gain from that. And that's how we're going to continue to excel and advance as people. We'll need to invent and create a space elevator. Tesla's already, or not Tesla, but SpaceX has already been doing the reusable rockets.
Yes.
That's huge, huge game changer.
Yeah,
so
putting the car up into space. Who's the guy who Musk? He just put his car up into space. That was awesome. I love that guy.
That was really awesome. He's a true visionary. He's the Albert Einstein or the Thomas Edison of our generation.
He absolutely is. Yep, I couldn't agree more. And you're right. There's so much innovation and thought process and just a whole bunch of unity and ideas that can be generated out of there. And then the ideas that are generated for that space exploration can also help us with our world, because when I first started my journey on, the changing Earth, it was really my opinion that technology is just too overwhelming, and technology is breaking our bond with Mother Nature, and it's too intrusive, and we've got to scale it back, kind of thing. And now that I've been down this road so much farther, it's how do we make them, work together? How can we synchronize those things so that our technology is helping, not cloud seeding or anything like that, but making it so that we're less intrusive upon Mother Nature while still satisfying human needs with the use of our technology. So, I've come to see like this really cool marriage that if we just took it to this next evolutionary step, we can really be doing some cool things, in my opinion.
Yep, exactly.
Well, James, that is all the time we have for this interview. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find your books, because they sound like super cool reads. Oh, and do you have them in audiobook too?
We do not have them in audiobooks just yet. We are working on getting that taken care of, hopefully over the summer.
Okay.
Believe it or not, they actually do cost quite a bit of money to turn into an audiobook. So.
Yep, or a whole lot of work. I know that.
Yeah, a whole lot of work. Yeah. So right now we write in a blistering pace. So we tend to knock out a book right now about one every 90 days.
That is crazy.
Yeah, our effort is really focused primarily on writing and then, as always, continuing to do the marketing campaigns as well.
Right.
So the series is, again, the Red Storm series. Book 1 is Battlefield Ukraine, and then Book 2 is Battlefield Korea. Book 3 comes out on March 14th, which is Battlefield Taiwan. There'll be a total of 6 books in the series, and they will be coming out roughly about 90 to 120 days apart from each other. Easiest place to find them is Amazon.
Well, and I'll go ahead and hook a link to them too from the blog post on this episode, so that'll
Sure.
be great. So.
And we've got a Facebook page as well. It's our World War III series. We tend to write a lot of military fiction books, so we're very interactive on there. We've got about 2,600 followers on that particular page, and people are free to shoot us questions, ideas, comments. Join our beta reader list and get a preview of what the books look like before they come out, and recommend ideas or changes before it's published. So,
all right, I'll provide that Facebook link as well. Alrighty, excellent. Well, thank you so much, James, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, James, so much for coming on and talking to me about this topic. Difficult topic, but extremely relevant right now, in my opinion. There's so many things that can lead to distrust between both the people and the government, and it just can't be that way. Our government was supposed to be created by the people, for the people. We should have a lot more transparency and just a bigger understanding of what is going on rather than just sensationalized media being thrown in our face. So, great topic, some great ideas on how we can start getting things back together, because everybody's like, rip it down or whatever. Well, what are you going to do? You can't just rip it down. You've got to have a plan and process for where we're going. What direction are we going? And then, to me, I don't know. I think that the federal government has too big of a job to do when they try to lay blanket laws down, and bringing laws and ideas back more to a state level and a local level will allow for people to feel like they have a voice in what is going on in their community and their area. And so lots of people out there angry because their voice is not being heard. Well, that's a problem because of a one-size-fits-all attitude, in my opinion. So great show today. Thanks so much, James, for coming on. I just want to remind you, I'm going to be out at the Self-Reliance Expo at the end of this month. That's March 23rd and 24th. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you can make it down there. That's in Mesquite, Texas. And remember, with the new book, the new Day After Disaster 2.0, I'm going to need to be collecting reviews on that book again because I did it as a brand new edition. So get out there, get on over to Amazon. I mean, if you really want to say thank you to an author, that's the best way to do it, is just by loading up my books with reviews. And right now they're kind of slacking a little bit. So reaching out to you guys, help me out. But until next time, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.